a trucker that he was just hauling hay from South Dakota. He was spending more money in diesel to get that stuff from South Dakota to Texas than the hay was even worth. But he knew somebody needed help and he was going to bring it. And so after, right after I, unload him, I said, "Oh, what are you up to now?" He said, "I'm headed back up to get another load." So here he is. I'm going to drive another 25, 30 hours for somebody he doesn't know.
Adam K. Isaacs, welcome to the Logos Collective.
Billy.
Where'd you get the middle name K?
Chris Parks. Theater extraordinaire.
Who is Chris Parks?
Chris Parks was our theater one act. What else did he do? Everything. Very cool, young, at heart teacher that we had back in high school, in Canadian high school.
Yeah. Do you know how he gave you the middle name K?
It's just, maybe you know more than I do. I think it was just random.
I asked him once, I was like, "Why do you call him that?" And he was like, "I have no other reason other than it just sounds right."
That sounds like Chris Parks.
And then when I was thinking about, okay, how do I start the podcast episode with Adam? I was like, I'm going to say Adam K. Isaacs. I was like, wait, that's not even his middle name.
Sounds great.
It's from Parks.
Yes.
Man.
Yeah. You need to have him on.
Yeah, if I can find him.
Sounds about right.
No,
dude.
I would love to. We could talk about a lot of different things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, he knows a little about a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And a lot about a lot.
I was actually telling Amanda when we were driving up here to the Panhandle that he rebuilt I don't know if he found one. I think he found an old one and he refurbished a Coke machine.
That sounds like Chris Park.
And he put some video on Facebook of him when he finally got it put together, trying it and drinking the Coke.
Oh, that's funny.
So
I'll never forget his little car. He's like, it's not about how fast your car is, it's about how nimble you are.
Yeah.
I can just zip through traffic.
He's a legend. Oh my gosh. Man, you've had a heck of a year.
It's been an interesting year and a half almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost a year and a half.
I feel like you've done a lot of things and been noticed for a lot of things the past couple years. But the big one was you had the article done on you in Texas Monthly, which I read for the first time yesterday, I think, all the way through. I thought it was really good, but that doesn't matter. What did you think about it?
I thought it was good. When we were in the New York Times back in 21, I think, you realize how a national media is so much different than something like state. Like in Texas, everybody knows what Texas Monthly is, whether they're subscribers or not. And there was feedback even from New York and stuff that I read about the Texas Monthly about our article. But, when we had our New York Times article come out in 2021, I had a professor that I had at Texas Tech that was then in Washington, message me, or LinkedIn or something, and say, "Hey, I had you in soils class, blah, blah, blah. Read your article, it was great." And then I had a guy in Somalia reach out too, through voice messaging on WhatsApp. And I don't even know how he got my number there. And you could hear their call to worship thing going on in the background, in their communities, as he's speaking to me, which is really cool. So traction wise, that went a long ways. I didn't hear anything like that from the Texas Monthly per se, not to that extent. But, and we can dig into this later, but I feel like those in agriculture struggle with telling their story. Either they're just not good at it, or there's a reason they're in agriculture, and it's because they're not good communicators or good with people or those kind of things. And so that's one thing I feel important, and why God has called me to doing somewhat what we do is to tell our story, because it needs to be told. So I think that's one reason why we've kind of gained some traction and been able to kind of get some bigger media sources and avenues, whether intended or not. The Texas Monthly, clearly, we didn't start a fire and want to go through that. But
well, did they reach out to you?
Yes, yeah, they did. Which it was just through mutual connections. The more and more in life, it's about who you know. You have to know some things too. But who you know can certainly change a lot in how your course and path in life, you know.
Yeah.
So
Was it, well then, what about the New York Times article? How did they find you guys to do that piece?
man, I don't even know. Oh, yes. Yep. Through who I know.
And just so people know, as we talk about this more, the New York Times article, which was done, was it 21 or 22?
I think I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's done a few years ago, was about the regenerative ranching that you guys are doing at your ranch, roughly. That's like the main point. And then this new Texas Monthly article was about the fire that happened.
Yeah, the Smokehouse Creek Fire, which is largest wildfire in Texas history, second largest wildfire in U.S. history, or maybe contiguous U.S. history.
Yeah, the title of the article is "The Panhandle is Burning. The Panhandle is Burning. Can ranching survive?" Did you like the article? Did you feel like it was inaccurate?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they did a very good job. You know, all those, for some of your more local news where, you know, maybe it's a mom and pop or so smaller, like they've got fact checkers, you know, like when somebody comes out and does photography, it's not the person writing the story. It's not even an employee of the New York Times or the Texas Monthly. It's a contracted, you know, photographer, somebody that's just sole proprietor kind of deal. And so there's a team that builds it. And so I think because of that, it makes it neat.
Yeah. I mean, it does, because they weren't just talking. I love how obviously the whole thing is about you and Aubrey's story, what happened during the fire, but they take these asides and they talk about like the geography of Canadian and the Panhandle, and they talk about the history of Canadian. I learned a lot. I thought that was super cool.
It's almost like watching a movie versus watching an episode of a TV show. You know, an episode of a TV show might be just like your 1 or 2 pager article in the magazine versus this is kind of like a movie. There's substance to it. You know, you get the full picture.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They kind of explain the context for who they're talking to. One of the things that I thought was really cool is how they mentioned when they were talking about the ranching techniques you use, which we'll talk about later, that you learned a lot of these at Texas Tech. Is that true?
Not really, no.
Dang.
I wish.
I was ready to go on a rant about how this is what universities were meant for.
They're 30 years behind. Like,
really?
It's a shame. It really is, because they're so conventional. And reason being because like they get their money for research and all these other things from these large multi-billion-dollar corporations that play a large role in even how the studies end. Like, it's manipulated to where it benefits these large corporations, whether it be some product they're selling or a patent on something or whatever else. And it's more and more as I'm in agriculture, like nature knows what it's doing and it knows how to take care of itself. And a product generally can't solve your problems. And so if you've got a problem, it's generally management, not a product that's going to fix management, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so how does a university benefit from that? How do pharmaceutical companies or any large multi-billion-dollar corporation that has something to sell, you know, a middleman, make money if they're not needed? So it's sad. And I think there's room for improvement, and I think there are making some strides, but when you're 30 years behind, you may always be 30 years behind. So 30 years from now, it may look okay today, but there's no telling what it may look like 30 years from now. So.
Well, then where are you getting or learning the new ideas that you feel like are...
So I'm like you. When I dive into something, I dive pretty deep.
Where do you dive?
Man,
Where do you go diving?
I don't even know. You know, just I'm sure Google searching just led to this Zimbabwean rancher that I ran across named Johann Zietzman that like started doing this holistic ultra high density grazing like in Africa before he got extradited. Like, and the government took away his ranch and everything. Like,
did they do that because of how he was ranching?
No, that was just
separate?
took any private landowner, they just took their land away. That was when I'm gonna go blank. I don't know the history well enough to know all of this, but that was when Rhodesia, you know, was a country, and now it is not. Now I think that's Zimbabwe. But at the time,
I don't know.
At the time, it was just not a place you would want to be. But anyways, I got in some like WhatsApp group, like somehow with hundreds of ranchers all over the world.
I remember that.
And studied that stuff like religiously. Now I'm still on there. I don't really look. It's kind of same stuff. No different story.
Was that the same WhatsApp group you had that buddy from with the big ranch in Argentina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So
these guys in this WhatsApp group are talking about this new method of ranching.
Yeah. And management and like the guy in Argentina is building products. Like I had to import stuff from Argentina at the time that were some things we were using on the ranch to like automatic gate openers for cattle and those kind of things because like they didn't have that in the US. And so I had to learn through, import taxes and just the process of it, getting stuck at customs. And now like you can go buy those things from American companies that are essentially a middleman for that type of stuff. But at the time it was a little bit more difficult.
What are some of the things you do that make you stand out compared to the common rancher?
We try to look at things holistically, and things change, right? Like you come out of college and you're broke and you're married and you're young and it's easy to want to chase the dollar, right? So that was probably a lot of the reason I was driven to find a different method initially was because, okay, yeah, I want to be self-employed. I'd worked for somebody else and realized, okay, I want to be self-employed. I'd like to move back home, but conventional is not going to pay the bills. So is there a way that I can do this? And so that's kind of what drove it initially. And a lot of that was don't spend money on stuff you don't need, like be very low overhead.
What's an example?
So like just buying a bunch of feed, right? And overgrazing and then running out of grass. And instead of having to sell off your cows, maybe in a low market or whatever else, you just keep buying more feed to try to keep your animals. And then it could just be this perpetual snowball.
Just burning through money.
Yeah, just burning money.
Yeah.
And so just looking at everything holistically and saying, okay, well, if I do this, how's it going to affect that? So that's kind of where we started. And bang for the buck, starting out, I only tried to spend money if I could like pay for that within a year or two. So fence and water, super easy. You start like getting better grazing distribution. So essentially, when you run cattle, the most common is you lease by the acre. Cows they graze grass, right? You just pay a per acre lease rate for grazing. If I'm going to pay a per acre lease rate, I want to be able to use all the acres that I'm paying for. And cattle aren't going to work too terribly hard and graze everything if there's only one water point and they got to walk 2 miles to go graze something else, right? They're going to camp out around wherever the water's at. And so, I mean, that alone, just being able to distribute water better and spread it out across your ranch, I'm going to use every acre that I'm paying for in lease. So that alone was extremely valuable. And then that's step number one. I tried to do some of the fencing first, where I just tried to subdivide the ranch and then rotate cows through. But then I found out my water was not nearly sufficient enough so essentially used to, and it's still very common today, people have cows in every pasture at all times. 365 days out of the year, there's cows in every pasture and they're just all split up, right? So if you need to go supplement your cows in the wintertime because they have a protein deficient diet, you have to go drive and check every single herd. So you may have a 30-mile loop versus if you were just able to combine all those animals and put them in one location and rotate them across your ranch, you could go drive to those cows, feed them, go back home, right? Like save a lot of time. So that's one cost-effective method we tried, but you have to have the water to do it. You can't move them to a pasture if the water can't keep up. And so what used to be good for 30 cows now needs to be good for 300 cows or 1,000 cows or whatever it is. So first I tried the fence and realized we were way underwatered. So then I had to focus on the water and then fence, and it's an ever evolving thing, right?
How'd you spread the water out?
Water pipelines. So basically we have large water storage tanks and then we just and we have those on top of a hill, and a water well pumps water into the storage tank. And then we have underground water pipelines that feed off of that going different directions. And then they either go to troughs or we have taps, and then we can run above ground water line and put water essentially anywhere we want. So like we've got probably 200,000 gallons of water storage, I would say, like across everything, not just in one spot. And having options is a good thing. And so, and it takes a team. Like I quickly learned that I don't need to be putting all that in. I can hire somebody. I'm very, very much into hiring, especially other young people that are in a trade. I think trades are so important. Like college is dumb now, in my opinion. Like I think you can, if you want to work for yourself, like be good at what you do, be excellent at whatever you do. And so I like to support other young people my age that want to be excellent at what they do. So like my water well guy is one, my pipeline guy is another guy that like, I'll hire that out. They're experts. They do it every day. They can do it way faster than me. I won't have to buy the equipment for it, all those kind of things. And so, most all of that I've just hired out to get installed. Let me focus on and do good at what I do good at, outsource the rest.
Mm-hmm. So you started spreading out water.
And started spreading out water.
Worked on the fencing.
And then worked on the fencing. And the fencing is so that you can have rest. So grass net, it's not going to recover and improve if it doesn't ever have the opportunity to regrow. And so if you have a cow in a pasture at all times, they're just going to go back and regraze, and that plant can never build roots. So the fencing allows you to separate them off from a piece of land until it is fully recovered, and then you can come back and graze it. And so, that's kind of what the fence gives you the option to do.
And then, there's a double benefit, right? Where the grass that they're not on is resting, but then the grass that they are on, since there's a high density amount of cattle, aren't they stamping the seeds deeper into the ground?
Yeah, not even necessarily seeds, but just the, plant life is carbon, right? And so if you took a barren landscape versus a landscape with a lot of grass or cover on it, laid down or standing up, whatever, ideally laid down, and you dumped a bunch of water on it, and then tried to drink the runoff water, like you're just going to be drinking a nasty, mucky, muddy mess off of the barren landscape versus the other, like you can still have pretty clean water actually, because the roots, the plants, all that stuff is keeping the soil where it's supposed to be and not translocating it. And so kind of that's the whole point behind it. And that's the thing too, like grazing animals are very much needed. Like grass is totally useless to humans. Like we can't do anything. Yeah, some lettuce and some of those things we can eat in a salad, right? But like beyond that, it's totally useless. So let's use a ruminant, 4-chambered stomach animal that has a bunch of bugs inside their stomach that can break down cellulose and lignin and all these different things and create meat out of it, something that we can eat, So yeah, ruminants are just a very cool God creation that people don't realize their value and worth. They provide such a big benefit, to our ecosystem, to help all the other wildlife and things function if used correctly.
Man, it's crazy how, being thoughtful and caring enough to do research and try new things, and even just tending to land can make the land prosper versus just letting cattle, do their thing on it.
I think most everybody has this innate caretaker inside of them that God designed and built into us. For those that are in agriculture, like it's a big role, and it's to be a servant and to be a caretaker of God's creation is not a small undertaking, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And so I just try to leave things better than I find them. At the end of the day, my kids or grandkids, if they're ranching, may look back and say, man, he, didn't do a very good job. Like there may be rapid improvements and changes that they make, but I'm just trying to do best with what I'm equipped with, the knowledge, gifts, abilities, talents, and equipment that I have for the resource that I have, and as time progresses, I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah. The things you're doing, people didn't know about. Not very long ago. Yeah. Okay. So you spread out water, you're putting the whole herd into smaller groups. Talk about the fencing.
Yeah. So, there's both permanent and temporary fencing. So traditionally people just use barbed wire fence. So it's like a 5-strand barbed wire T-posts, heavy duty braces. That stuff costs like $15,000 to $17,000 per mile just to put in. So one section of land is 640 acres. So a square section has fence all the way around it. It's 1 mile square. So 1 mile by 1 mile by 1 mile by 1 mile takes 4 miles just of exterior barbed wire fence. So you're talking what, 15, 30, 60 grand, right? 60,
That's
65
so
grand
much money
to fence that. Yeah. Versus I started using electric fencing. So I would just do a single wire. We had a bunch of old wood posts that were just used on the ranch that I just used as an end brace and just had those put in. Tied the one wire off and then just electrified it to where if cattle touched it, it would electrocute them. And then they learned really quickly, okay, don't touch that. And it's like, it hurts when you touch it, but I mean, I've been shocked plenty of times. It's not that big of a deal. It's lasts that
But the
long.
cattle don't mess with it.
No, the cattle don't mess with it as long as you keep it electrified. At the time, after I'd hired somebody to do all that for me, just a local guy, just because he was out of a job. I think it cost me like $900 a mile to put in. And at the time, probably barbed wire fence was maybe 12 or 13,000. So still like 12, 13 times cheaper. So that allowed me to be able to, I couldn't have done it financially, barbed wire. It just wouldn't have made a lot of sense. And so we just used like old fiberglass posts that are reused from like the oil field and those kind of things that cut them down. That's what's in line. And then you just have a high tensile electric wire, just a single wire that you run.
Where'd you learn to do that?
Online somewhere, probably. Yeah, there's especially now, there's a lot of resources. I mean, electric fencing has been around since like the 80s or 70s. And so that wasn't necessarily anything groundbreaking. They've gotten newer technology that made things a little bit easier, but that wasn't really that groundbreaking. And then we also have permanent electric fence, which is on a reel. So just imagine like a reel with a handle on it, and they're geared, and then just almost looks like a shoestring that's electrified. It has little strands of metal running through it that you can electrify for temporary fencing. And so we utilize that too. Nowadays, people are transitioning to collars. So now they have electric, like shock collars that go on cows' necks. And so people are transitioning to that. And I've been interested in that. I've kicked the can down the road because the technology isn't quite there yet, and they're getting really close. I think we would be there here if we had consistent cellular service. We don't have consistent, and they would put satellite towers across the ranch nowadays, but like our whole county may be out of service for one day, one day a month or one day every 3 months.
And then the cattle go
so
wild.
What do you do on that one day when you don't have any fence? Like, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time. And the hassle of having to keep a collar on an animal to me and it's not that fencing is natural, but to me, I question some of the herding. I think maybe some of the animal performance could suffer a little bit more because I don't know. Maybe I'm getting older and I'm not open to new ideas too. I don't know. I think that's something I got to be mindful of, but we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. So
how does that work? They have a collar, and if they go to a certain spot they're not supposed to be, they just get shocked?
No, all of them are different. Have you seen like those fences, virtual fences for dogs?
I don't even know how this works. I've seen them advertised.
It's same concept. Basically, you just draw a boundary on an app, and it knows where it's at by GPS, and then there's a GPS on the collar, so it knows where the animal is. And then as they approach that boundary, generally it'll give auditory warning first. The first time they put the collar on, they're not going to know what that is or really care. And then as they keep moving, then boom, it'll shock them. And then they can learn from there on out. If I ever hear auditory, if I keep proceeding,
I'm going to get shocked.
So eventually they'll just say, okay, well, auditory, okay, turn.
Do you think the animals like memorize the boundary?
Absolutely. I mean, that's how it works for dogs. With livestock, I mean, you may be moving it every day.
See, that's what seems sad to me, is that they're getting these auditory or shock warnings, and they're like, what? Like that, I don't see any difference. Does that make sense? Like, at least with a dog, they can see like, okay, that's the sidewalk. It's not our yard. I'm like breaking the rules. But I feel like if you're moving cattle constantly, they're like, we just get shocked randomly.
Well, they wouldn't get, I mean, once they learn the audio. So essentially just imagine a square. Okay, this is where they're grazing now. You want to open it up and move them to a new pasture. You would just remove one side of the square to where it's open. Eventually, at some point, another animal's going to go try to graze over there, and it's going to keep proceeding, and it's not going to hear anything.
And he'll just keep going.
So then once it's in fresh grass, and it never heard anything, all the others are going to look at it and say, oh, I want fresh grass. So then they're going to follow it, and none of them are going to hear the auditory until they reach the next boundary. And they'll hear an auditory, and they'll turn, and they'll all stop there and go on. So, like, there may be a trial and error for 2 or 3 days of them getting shocked. Primarily beyond that, like, I'd be very surprised if...
No, because you're right, because they learn from the auditory piece, and they know that...
So they're not going to get shocked very frequently.
Well, the most obvious next question is, do you get to set what sound they hear? Do you get to record it?
I don't think so. No.
Cow, no.
Or they can all be named.
You're getting real close.
Betsy. Stop. The one I've researched that I think is...
We might need to invest in that, collar that you get to set.
And they're leased, so you have an annual... So, like, we're very, very big on analyzing costs. And fencing infrastructure is an overhead, and then we can spread that out over, say, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. and it's not a direct cost to the animal. The fencing, like you lease those collars, there's like, I don't know, 35 or 50. Actually, I think it's like $70 a collar a year. So that's a direct cost now that this animal has to carry versus it being an overhead spread out across the ranch. And then your towers are like $4,500 a piece. And when you're talking like it's going to take 8 of those, you could hire you could build your fence and then hire labor, I think, for cheaper if you can find good labor. The problem is, I mean, in all of society, but even more so in ranching, it's really hard to find labor nowadays. Like people don't want to work hard, especially in extreme conditions, in unideal circumstances in rural America. Like, so I think that's a piece of it too, is there could be some a lot of value there.
You're not looking for people to hire.
As time progresses, I think the costs are going to come down as more competition comes along and they make improvements. And so, yeah, and we'll get to it, but we have a clean slate right now because of the fire of destroying all our fencing. And so I reevaluated, just like, well, do we put fencing back or do we just do the collars? But the collars also have maintenance that fence does too. Something falls off annually, you might need to recheck them or pull them off. They have solar panels. They have a battery life though, that several years battery life. And then if you want to be fluid and flexible and change the amount of animals you have or what animals you have all the time, or maybe you're taking in animals for somebody else or those kind of things, like anytime you receive them, you'd have to put collars on. And I despise and hate work day. Everybody loves cowboying. Like people want to come out to a branding and this, that, and the other. Like those are the most stressful days for me. I despise them. I hate it when livestock are in pens because it's stressful for them. It's stressful for most humans. And it's not where they're meant to be. And so having to run them through chutes and all of that stuff just to put a collar on or take a collar off to me is unnecessary work. Doesn't mean it's not needed or not. It's a tool in the toolbox. Collars are. At some point I may pull them out, but not right now.
But like you said, right now, you can just pull out the little fiberglass thing out of the ground, move the fence. I mean, and the cows aren't stressed out, right?
And they can be. We just got back from Montana yesterday, and I got to visit a gentleman who, he was the first one doing high density grazing in the United States. And it was the coolest ranch I've ever visited in regards to management. And he's got he's got everything just dialed in super well. And seeing a herd move when I was there and how calm they were made me realize, and I've always known that that's an area that I need to improve upon, is livestock handling. Because that means, if they're happy and healthy and not stressed out, they're going to gain better. Their calves are going to be healthier, all those kind of things. I've known that that's something I need to brush up on and be better at. And he's got that dialed in to where they were not stressed at all. They knew the program and, just another day in the office, kind of thing. So
that's so cool. And you met him just because you reached out to him? How did that work?
I heard a podcast last year, and when I heard him talk, and I'd never even heard about the guy, and that's pretty foreign for this too. Like it's such a small, it's growing regenerative kind of ranching is, but this guy was like totally off the radar, and I don't even know how they got on that podcast. But he even said, I don't really go do continuing education. And he said, I don't want to sound prideful, but I'm so far ahead of everybody else. There's not a lot I can learn from other people. And so he said, I don't go do the schools and all the other things that maybe you do.
Because I'm
beyond that. Yeah. Like that's 20 years behind me.
So is he testing his own new ideas and things? Or is he just kind of happy with how
he's always manipulating and changing some things that he's doing, maybe just tweaking some stuff, but not necessarily. He's got a pretty well functioning system. So why try to fix what's not broke,
What podcast was he on? And what's his name?
That Chad Peterson, episode 149 on Ranching Returns podcast is the name of it. And most people that might listen to it it's the first part's just kind of his story. Nothing really that special over the first 20 minutes, but and even some people might just kind of brush over some of the other things. But there's some really good nuggets in there of like, oh, this is cool. And it's nothing like actually seeing his place though. Like he's doing some really cool stuff.
That's cool. Man.
So just people like that is kind of how I've learned. A lot of organic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a researcher.
Yeah.
Just reaching out to somebody that you don't know and seeing if you can visit them,
Man.
So
you know what it makes me think about?
What's that?
Is, when Jesus says, how does he phrase it? He says, those who seek shall find, those who knock, the door shall be open. Those who ask receive, those who seek shall find, and those who knock, to whom the door shall be opened. I feel like Jesus has all these sayings that growing up in church, people only ever applied to just salvation. It's like, oh, it's just about getting saved, not going to hell. But these sayings, I feel like, work out in
apply in life.
Yes, practical real life too. Like you, it's like, okay, I need to find a better way to do ranching so that I can actually make a living for my family. And you just start looking, you're seeking, you're knocking, and the doors slowly and in the right order, like you kind of find the thread of truth and you keep following it and it just starts to work. I feel like that happens to a lot of people in all kinds of fields.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like if you want to know and you actually try, you'll probably find out.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, certainly.
The lady, what's her name who wrote the article? I have it here. I got it. Emily McCullough.
Yeah.
Emily McCullough. She said in the article, and I did not know this about you, she said that you don't like the term regenerative ranching.
Yeah, it's just overdone now. Like it's just a buzzword.
Is that the only reason you don't like it?
Yeah,
just a buzzword.
It's a fad, like for people to want to try it and do it, and the amount of people that actually stick with it will not be nearly as high as the people that have short-term adopted it, probably. But I think it's a good thing that it's a fad, and people that are not even in ranching have heard about it because it's at least shed a light on some areas. And I think one of my biggest frustrations, and Chad and I talked about this last week at his ranch, was that everybody thinks it's just like sunshine and rainbows and everything's great with regenerative ranching, but there's still some flaws that like a lot of people don't stick with it long enough or understand or see the full picture. And so they either try it and they fail and then they bash it, or they just haven't worked out all the kinks. Like it's not flawless. Nature is a cruel thing at times, and when you start implementing people into it, you're going to have, people problems. And I think just more of a holistic approach is what I like a lot better. Looking at everything as a whole and how one part affects the whole, to me, as a much clearer image of how it should be and things work, rather than regenerative. Like regenerative is bringing, bringing life back to something that maybe doesn't have life. And I think having that mindset, maybe you miss some pieces and parts of it.
I remember when I think a lot, when you shared a lot of these things with me, the first time I heard them from you was when I was pretty much at y'all's house for like a week or two, and I was stuck in the US trying to live in Spain, but I couldn't test
What year was that?
It would have been the winter of 2020 going, or it was 2020, 2021, like December, January 2021. And I kept testing positive for COVID, even though I was healed. I couldn't, my PCR test kept failing. So I'm like stuck in the States. And I don't know what my parents were in Amarillo, but I just kept hanging out in Canadian with you at Aubrie. And so I got to spend a lot of time with you, and you were driving me around the ranch, telling me about all these cool things. And the big things that stuck out to me, I remember talking about the electric fencing. I remember we did talk a little bit about the water movement, not as much. You were talking about using drones as opposed to like you going out to check the cattle. And then, but one of the things you shared with me, it's what you're talking about, this holistic idea is, you were talking about how you forecast the price of cattle and how much money it's going to cost to put 1 pound on them, and to decide if you're going to sell them now. Does it make more sense to sell them now or to wait 6 months or a year and sell them then? I think that even helped me in life, just thinking about, okay, think about what's actually happening with what you're doing right now. Is it wiser to wait, or what are the costs to sell or make a move now?
Yeah. So that's called, a lot of that's called sell by marketing, a term somebody created. Doesn't really matter.
Did you learn that at Tech?
No.
What did you learn at Tech?
Nothing, to be honest. It gave me a passion for ranching that I really didn't have maybe growing up. beyond that, the principles and practices that I use, none of it was at Texas Tech University, unfortunately, or really any university. Like the only one that might hold a little bit, the only one that might be a little bit of value, not a little bit. One program that is good is I've heard TCU, their ranch management program, which is like a 1-year deal. It's not like an undergraduate degree or anything, is pretty good. They teach you how to run your numbers, and you get to go visit ranches and things like that. It's above and beyond by far what a 4-year degree was at Texas Tech. So
man, so you think they're teaching sell by marketing?
Maybe to some extent, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if you know your numbers, then there can be some of that. But the whole premise behind sell by marketing is just what is undervalued and what's overvalued. If you have an undervalued asset, let's go ahead and get rid of it. And can we replace that with an undervalued asset and add more value to it? So if your car is if you got a Toyota car, a lot of times like they just don't depreciate a whole lot versus you have some other vehicle that depreciates a lot, like probably keep the old one, get rid of the Toyota or whatever else, it's just looking at that. It's called the value of gain, and then that could translate, like you said, to regular life. Like how much gain can I get? How much value is there by holding on to X, Y, or Z? And if there is value in that, let's hold on to it. And then once it's reached its maximum value or what we feel like is, or we can replace it with something that we can add a lot more value to, let's do it. So I know there's some people they just do that on Facebook Marketplace. Have you seen that trend where people try to start with a $1 item and they sell it, and then they want to move to $1 million item eventually, or whatever the number is? Right? It's exact same concept. That's all it is.
Man, that's a lot simpler. I've always thought, I've seen that and I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. I don't think I could.
It's fun. You'll go backwards at times too, though. I mean, it's not a flawless thing. And you may think it's not market predicting either. Like you don't really know what the future holds. So if you try to start speculating much with it, you might get handed.
That's what I thought about the first time you told it to me. It's like, well, obviously the price that you're projecting for cattle to be at in 6 months, you might be wrong. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But I just remember I was like, man, at least he's thinking about it. Like, and I was like, it's crazy. Exactly how much it costs to add a pound of weight.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating.
I think that's that's what I love about ranching. Some days I'm a plumber, some days I'm an economist, some days I'm a nutritionist, like all these different things, right? Some days I'm a vet. Certainly some of those hats I don't like wearing. There's certainly some that I enjoy more naturally better at, whatever else. And that's where I've tried to outsource again more my deficiencies and amplify or do more of, the things
you
that
care
I'm good
about.
at.
If you had to narrow it down, what's the thing that you think you're best at?
I'm good at numbers. So the financial side of it. And then I'm just a natural ecologist. Like I love the ecology side of it. So the animals are just a tool for me. They're a tool to either make money or to improve land. That doesn't mean I don't care about animals. I deeply care about animals. I've got bird dogs. I love bird hunting. I go to travel all over doing that type of stuff. But some people, so like one thing I said I could improve upon is my livestock handling, stockmanship type stuff. It's because I don't care as much about that. That's something I know I'm more deficient in.
Well, I mean, anyone who listens to this or knows you, or reads the Texas Monthly article knows you care. I mean, that's one of the themes is how horrible and heartbreaking it was.
Certainly. Yeah. Again, holistic. You have to look at it all. Some things you might get neglected though, because there are so many hats that you have to wear, and that's the hard thing about it. Is it's a tough business as is. You can make it work, but it's a tough business, and so you can't hire everything out. If you did, you wouldn't make any money.
The ecology, though, you do. I mean, even in pre-college, in high school, you were with Hamby. You were always, we would drive somewhere and you were pointing out every single.
But I didn't care about that stuff then, though. That's what's crazy.
You care about it now, though.
Like I hated it. I think it was because it was forced.
You were always telling me,
but it was forced.
Little blue stem.
Yeah, and that was probably just a prideful thing. Because like, oh, I know what that is, and he doesn't, so I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
But it is.
But it's grown on you.
It has, absolutely.
Because in college, then, in my recollection, in high school, you were all about the plants. Then in college, you were always telling me about soil science.
Again, when I dive deep. So there might be a 2-year period where I do plants, and then you realize, oh, okay, well, that's because of soils. So then you go to soils, and then it's like, okay, well, that's because of this and because of that. And so it's just this cascading snowball effect.
This is why I always wanted you to meet Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean is very much that way.
Y'all, I feel like y'all are so similar just in your areas, you know. Sean's like water and snowfall, and you're ranching and
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's why I love what I do. Like, this is what God has called me to do. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. And so how can I glorify him through that and be excellent at all that I do? And as you age, again, things change. Like, I chase the dollar now. Like, quality of life is in every decision that we make ranching wise. Like, is this going to be, and maybe it might lead to a seasonal lack of quality of life, but it can lead to future larger quality of life. Maybe it's worth it, right? Like, you give and take, but man, that is very, very much first and foremost in our decision-making processes of things we do, or where we do things, or why we do things, what kind of animals we run, when we run them, how we run them, how many, all those different things are, is this going to add value holistically? You know, not just financially, not just quality of life, like family life, like all these different things.
What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it, man. So speaking about family, quality of life, all that, can we talk about the fire?
Absolutely.
Tell me, I mean, I'd love to hear it. Have you sat down and told the story to anyone?
Oh yeah, I have a lot. Now is probably better than ever. So I want to leave a legacy in what I do. What's the point of building up a bunch of assets or all these different things if there's no legacy to leave, right? And I feel like now with the technology we have and all these different things, there's no better platform or way to share stories and make impacts on people and have something that I can hand down from generation to generation. You know, like 400 years from now, one of my ancestors could probably Google, if there's such a thing at the time, Google my name, right? And they can pull up the New York Times article or the Texas Monthly. Like, it's a way to encapsulate through an outside source my story, our story, whatever situation we were in. And so to me, that's leaving a legacy, you know? And so aside from that, sorry, I get a little bit sidetracked. You asked about the fire. That's one thing that I wanted to do through like the Texas Monthly article was through that.
Like have the story documented?
Yes, have the story documented. So I've told a lot of people after the fire, after everything kind of slowed down, I wanted to sit down and record and tell these stories in a conversational format, not like I'm reading off of a document, some of the stories from the fire. And I've done, you know, I've spoken at church or some of these other things. So there's some pieces there, but I wanted to do it in this type format. And there's actually, man, I'd have to do some digging. There's a guy that does this as a business. He travels and talks to the older generation and records stories and all these different things. And then you can they'll go gift it, you know, to their grandkids or whatever else. And it's encapsulated and, you know, it's a time capsule, right? And, you know, he's very good at digging things out of people. And so for somebody that might feel uncomfortable sharing and all that, I'd heard about that through a ranching podcast that I listened to called Working Cows, and that guy had been on there. I was like, man, that's really cool. So I think that's the idea that I'd thought of. It was, as time progresses, you forget pieces and parts of the story. So I want to share it and record it close enough that everything's still pretty fresh on my mind, but I couldn't share it right after the fire because, one, I was so busy with all the other stuff, and two, there was so much emotion I might not have even been able to get through because I'd been crying so much. So there's a balance. I'm on the tail end of it. I wished I would have done this last year, but hey, what better platform and way to now? So
it's all, I mean, the Logos Collective didn't exist last year, so
there you go.
We couldn't have talked about it.
Couldn't talk about it there.
No, it was just an idea. But you were the first person I told about this.
The podcast.
The idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was when I was moving back from Albuquerque to Houston, and I don't know if I was driving or we were just on the phone, but I think I told you about the idea and you were like, you encouraged me.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah. Well, because I didn't know. I was going to tell you, and then I figured you might be like, it's not going to work. That's stupid. But you were like, that sounds great. And then but it took me like 2 years to like start on it. But
You've met somebody and you got married, and I mean, there's a lot of change.
got
right?
busy last year.
You've moved,
yeah, a couple times.
So
Yeah, and then God's timing is His timing. You know, things don't happen quickly all the time. So, I guess let's just start. Leading up to the fire, you knew that the conditions were bad.
Yeah. So we live in the Texas Panhandle. Canadian Texas is where we ranch. In very northern part of the Texas, Panhandle. We have winters up here. Everything's dry. More and more, with more and more frequency each year, there are wildfires around here. Typically, that they can be around in January through till whenever we get spring green up, which is generally April. Most commonly, it's mid-March, like March the 10th through like the 20th, 22nd, somewhere in there. In the Texas Panhandle, there's generally a drastic wildfire. And it's because we get lots of wind that time of year. There's, no green grass yet, lots of old growth. And then as time has progressed, a lot of our infrastructure, power lines and those kind of things are getting old enough that's how a lot of these start, is a power line falls down through strong winds and starts a fire. And so, the last several years, I've never carried insurance year-round on my livestock, if for like acts of God, but I've always carried it seasonally. Typically, it's around that January probably time frame, maybe December, whatever. I'll buy like a 3 or 6 month policy on them, and then when it greens up, I can call and cancel it and those kind of things. And to me, that was fairly cheap insurance, no pun intended, just for whatever potential natural disaster. And a lot of the premise why I'd bought it too is one, wildfire, but two, I didn't ever want to see myself in a situation where a wildfire is coming, and let's just say for easy numbers, I have $1 million worth of cattle out in the pasture. What's the likelihood that I might be in front of them, trying to move them to safety, putting myself in a potential bad situation because I know if they fall over and die, I'm going to lose $1 million, or I can carry insurance on them and I can still do what I need to do to hopefully put them into a situation where they might be safe in front of a fire. But knowing I can leave and take care of me and my family and put ourselves into a very safe situation away from that fire, and know that worst case scenario, we're not going to be digging ourselves out of a hole the rest of our lives.
It's not, clouds your judgment less.
Yes.
Right.
So, that was the whole premise behind that. And so we've been buying it for years, never needed to use it, but kept doing it. And February 2024, probably the 20th or so. I just look at the weather forecast, right? We'd had a pretty mild winter, like quite a bit of moisture. Winds really weren't that bad. And then come mid-February, I just was looking at the 1 week or 10-day forecast and I was like, man, a week out, it's not looking good. Like, I'm going to go ahead and buy a policy. So I think I bought it on a Wednesday. And looking at the 7-day, I was looking at a 10-day forecast, and 7 days out the next, or 6 days out the next Wednesday or something. Tuesday or Wednesday, it wasn't looking good. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy it. So I did. Then that Monday or Tuesday rolled around of the next week, and sure enough, a fire started over 100 miles from our place, but the wind was moving our direction, and fire can move very rapidly here. And the worst fires that we have are ones when we have, so that time of year, we still get northern cold fronts. So the worst fires that we have is when a fire starts, it works and goes for a while in one direction, generally from southwest to northeast or west to east. And then if you have a cold front come from the north, now it just pushes all this new fire line down. And so now you have this just massive catastrophic wildfire. And so that's another reason why that time of year is dangerous. And we were going to have one of those that next week.
Because everything's dry, but you still get cold fronts.
Yeah, everything's dry, but it's one thing to basically just draw a line, have a piece of paper, have a pencil, draw a line and point an arrow one direction, and you have a fire. Now, perpendicular to that, have a wind change and draw 20 arrows, or depending upon how long your line is, draw 20 lines and arrows perpendicular at a 90-degree angle going from that, and you can see how big your fire line is with one line versus how big your fire is.
So
versus all
they
the
call it
others.
The head of the fire, right?
Yes, the head of the fire.
The head of the fire, super wide.
changes. So essentially, the front of a fire, the direction the fire is moving is the head. The sides are the flank. And so essentially, when a fire starts, it's moving one direction. If the wind changes, a flank will now turn into a head. And so instead of having a head that may be 2 miles wide, 3 miles wide, that's a pretty large head and moving in one direction. If you have a flank turn head like this one, you had a 100-mile head then after that, So it's just catastrophic. So that's what we had. But that Tuesday, I think, is when it started. And I was thinking, man, this isn't going to be good. And a fire radio lives on me. Like, unfortunately, I didn't grow up that way, but that time of year, now I have one on my hip on any red flag day or day that looks like it's not going to be good because you never know when something's going to pop up. And I'd already been prepping the week before. I was filling some water tanks, some skid unit, like firefighting units that we have in vehicles, and filling water and just kind of small prepping things, not like creating a go bag or anything like that to that point. But Aubrie knew that was kind of her job. If we did need to evacuate, that she would pack up. We'd kind of already had a list of things that we would want to take. And we've packed up things before. Maybe 1 or 2 years before that, we'd packed up and left before, but it wasn't needed. Didn't end up, or maybe we'd pack bags and we didn't evacuate. So that was just a good exercise, to be honest. But here's the problem too. I do the firefighting skid units and all these things. Every time you do that and don't have a fire, you start to question, is it worth it? Because I may spend a day prepping, and then if a fire doesn't happen, and you do that 10 times, the list might get smaller each time. And then when you do need it, you wish you'd have done everything
The way you did it the first time.
So that was somewhat, in this case and scenario, an instance, and that's everything from, like I said, the firefighting skid units. That's like pre-watering your yard on directions you think the fire is going to come from. So like running your sprinkler system for 24 hours or whatever it is, just trying to get everything pretty wet. So that way, if it does come through, the intensity is not nearly as bad. Like I said, packing bags, making sure, okay, do I have a pillow, change of clothes, dogs, dog food, cases of water. Do I have a generator set up to where if we run out of electricity, can I run water? Do I take a generator with me? Do I take gas cans? Do I go buy gas because there may be a shortage of that, or there may be no electricity? All these different things. And so we'd lost power. I don't remember. All of this runs together, but we'd lost power the day after the fire started. And it was still on the eastern border of the county west of us, like approaching the western border of our county, I think is close to maybe when we lost power. And so, like I said, this all runs together. They stopped school. That's when Aubrie said it really hit her, is when they, ended school early and had them come pick up kids and stuff. I was like, okay, yeah, it's probably going to reach us. But so we knew the front was coming again too. And it was really questionable. Like, and here's another thing too, like you kind of hope that the front hits before it reaches you so that it doesn't reach you.
Turn towards you. Yeah.
Right. But knowing that the front's going to hit, that's just going to make it devastating for anybody that's downwind. Right. So like if it's going to happen, ideally it happens sooner rather than later so that maybe it doesn't hit you. And there was so much smoke, you didn't know where fire was and where smoke was because smoke was going hundreds of miles. Right. So like we didn't know how far east it had gone, but the day the fire hit us, I think it hit our house around 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. We left at like 3:30 or 4.
What finally triggered you to leave if you left an hour and a half before?
Well, it was on the ranch at that time.
You knew it was?
Yeah.
I think they said in the article you saw flames or something,
yeah,
right?
So...
But behind the hill?
I struggle with control problems, and I have never felt the feeling that I got. We knew the fire was probably going to get to us, not 100% certainty, but the fire was approaching the ranch. I was up, I think, putting some water around the chicken coop or something like that. And I remember looking down at the river and seeing flames on our property. I didn't have any cattle down there. They were further off, but seeing those flames. And that's when I knew, okay, yeah, when that wind shifts, it is going to come right to us because it's already on us, right? My gut, my stomach, like, when your stomach drops, it was that, but like on a whole nother level, like knowing all of the U.S. military could be here with all of that they have, the resources that they have, and there's nothing they could even do. just a total and utter feeling of hopelessness. And tears, I remember, just started falling down my face, and I looked at Aubrie was on the back porch feeding the dogs, and just knowing that there was a lot of pain and suffering already going on, and there was going to be for the animals, my animals, later. Again, bags were already packed. We already knew what vehicles we were going to be taking at that point. And probably within 30 or 45 minutes, we'd left the house from there. But yeah, I don't wish that feeling on anyone ever. I don't wish the situation that we went through on anyone ever, even my worst enemy. Certainly not something I would ever want anybody to ever have to go through. But just that total feeling of utter hopelessness was life-changing, honestly. A new sense of, man, I really do have a problem with feeling like I control things when I don't, a reminder that I don't. And so we had 2 vehicles, dogs loaded up, all the things that we felt like we needed. Took stuff from our house, laptop, right? Like maybe family wedding photos on a flash drive, wedding rings, little things like that. I parked some things in locations that I felt like they would be safe. Maybe a trailer that I might need, or this vehicle or that. Our garage ended up burning. I never would have thought that it would have burned. But here was an internal conflict. So I needed to have the generator out there to be able to run the sprinkler system. I was afraid to put the generator out in the grass where it's dead at the power pole to run the sprinkler system, because I thought if a fire comes through, it may burn up my generator. If it burns up my generator and I have livestock that live or whatever else, how am I going to give them water? How are we going to have any electricity? So I had this internal battle of, okay, do I leave the generator in the garage where I know it's going to be safe? Or do I pull it out and run the sprinkler system and hopefully save the house if a fire hits? I decided to do the latter. Praise God I did, because where I thought it was going to be safe in the garage was not, because the garage burned up. I mean, there was nothing left of it. And so that was a total God thing, right? And that might have saved our house too. I don't know. I mean, I have a video of it burning up to our house when I was watching on the Ring camera when we were...
When it was burning up to your house, was the sprinkler system still running?
Up till the generator died. So we were watching it burn.
So it went over the generator?
Yeah, it burned up one of the tires on the generator, and it still burned through the grass that was wet. And that's another thing too, when you have 50-mile-an-hour winds, a lot of the water just evaporates. It just blows away.
Oh, it's so hot
dry.
too.
It's so hot.
Yeah.
So we watched it burn all the way up to the house, and then it cut out when the flame front was like right at the house.
Camera cut out.
The camera cut out. And I was like, man, camera got too hot, or house is on fire or something. I thought we lost the house, Well, come to find out, the generator had shut off. The fire starved the generator from oxygen, and so it totally shut off. And so that was the reason why it cut out, because it had lost power. And so, again, though, praise God, I had that generator there. And I've learned, too, like, one of the biggest learning things from the fire is have multiple things and have them in different locations. It's nice. Like, if you have a bunch of screwdrivers, right, you're going to put them in this compartment of this toolbox. If you lose that toolbox, you don't have a screwdriver.
You have no screwdrivers.
Yeah.
No screwdrivers.
So organization, I know you love organization, like having your things organized where they're at, right? It's super nice. But in situations where you might lose something, it's kind of nice to have stuff strung out and spread out everywhere, because you still might have one after it's over with.
Totally.
And so I've learned in that instance, like, I've got a couple of generators now, and one's here and one's there. And so just a balance of that. But aside from that, when we were leaving, I had 2 herds, a set of cows and some baby calves, and then a set of yearlings. And then there was my dad's horses, and then our donkeys were with the yearlings. And they were right on the county road when we were leaving, and or right by the county road. I moved them from one pasture to another and put them right at the county road, hoping that might be enough of a fire break that it's going to be hot where they're at, but they were on the downwind side of the county road, knowing if a fire came through, if they stayed there, they would probably be okay. And so that's where we put them. Again, fire was on the ranch, and then we left, and I remember just crying as we were driving off, knowing that there wasn't anything I could do beyond that. Some people try to start cutting fences. When a fire is that big, you can't cut enough fences in front of them to keep them safe, like, because they're just going to try to outrun the fire. And a fire, one, moving that fast, they might be able to outrun it for a while, but they're not outrunning the smoke, and they're going to die to smoke inhalation because they're going to breathe so much smoke for so long. And so that's where we ended up putting them. And then we left. My wife and I, Aubrie, had bought a place, I don't know, 6 months before that, the fire, 13 miles from our house, and there's some farmland next to it. And I knew we could go sit on the farmland and it would be a safe place. Plus, it was further east. So I thought, well, the fire front may not even make it that far. So that's where we drove. My parents met us there.
Sit on the farmland because was it tilled up?
It was wheat, so it was green. So, I mean, it could burn a little bit maybe, but it was a safe place to sit. And we knew there's a lot of farmland north of there too that the fire probably wouldn't go through. And so that's where we sat. And as we were sitting there, I was thinking, okay, marketing, what do I need to do? I knew I wasn't going to have any grass left. And so I was not going to have any feed. All my hay was probably going to burn up. And so I was just thinking, man, I think I may just sell any animals that live. And so I started trying to make phone calls, which you didn't have service hardly anywhere because there was no power for the most part. And so self-service, even across the whole ranch, or the whole county, was negligent at best, or negligible at best.
Well, the towers are burning down, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that works, but it was certainly terrible service for quite some time. And so I was trying to make phone calls to like a sale barn and this, that, and the other, just thinking, man, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get my local truckers probably to haul anything. I knew they'd be either busy with their own problems or trying to help other people. So I thought, I'm going to call. So like I called Oklahoma City where we'd sold some cattle and just had left them a voicemail saying, hey, we're in such and such situation, maybe sending you some cattle, and then I could line up, stuff from there, right? Like animals to me were the first thing to take care of because I knew that they were going to be harmed, hurt, not have anything to eat, not have any water because we don't have electricity. Let's just sell them and get rid of our losses and move on, which looking back, I would do that differently now. I learned a lot from it.
What would you do?
Probably try to have held on to them. There were so many people willing to help. One of my pump suppliers was, he had a guy come out just a few days after the fire and start fixing some wiring so that I would be able to pump water. And then so much hay started coming in. We could have started unloading hay. Our tractor didn't burn, and so we could have unloaded trucks with hay, and we could have fed them in some pens, at least to buy us some time. Not a long-term solution, but short-term. Just because you'd have been taking a beating if you would have just sold them immediately. Like you'd have to sell them as they just went through a fire. They're going to look like crap. Hair's going to be burnt off. Like they'd have sold for pennies on the dollar, And so did that. The fire wasn't really that intense once it got up to the farmland we were at because there were so many breaks because of the fire that had gone through so much other farmland. We started putting I had a firefighting unit, so my dad and I drove around and put a little bit of fire out just next to the property that we'd bought and knew that we could probably save it, so we would have grass there. So that was a blessing in disguise. If we'd had animals that had survived, that was a place to go, right, for grass. And then, Aubrie and my parents too were pretty antsy, like, let's go back and see if we have homes, right? So they started heading back to the house, and both my parents were in different vehicles as well, so there was 4 vehicles amongst us. I went to go check on a lease place on the way back where my cows were, just to kind of see what it was like. And it was dark at this point. It was probably 6 o'clock maybe, which is close to sunset maybe. Yeah. But for that time of year, close to sunset, but it was so dark because all the smoke, it was dark. And I drove in there and I remember just having to dodge dead bodies of my animals. And so started sobbing as I was pulling in there and pulled up to one of my landlord's houses and it was totally gone. And so when I was up there, I had service and I wanted to call her. And so I called her daughter and just said, hey, just wanted you to know that your mom's home is not here anymore. So that was a really hard phone call. And then Aubrie called me probably when I was on the phone then and said, hey, you need to come back to the house. There's some stuff the house is still here, but there's some stuff that needs to be put out. So I headed home because I had the firefighting skid unit.
Why do you think the house didn't burn?
Our house? I think, one, because we have cool season grasses, so fescue is typically green that time of year. Not total fescue, but we do have some fescue, so the fire intensity was not that bad. Most of it's rock and the sprinklers. I'd been running sprinklers for several days around it, and so the ground was pretty moist, and so most of that stuff still burned, but it wasn't that bad. So yeah, I think that. Why our garage burned, because it was a metal garage. I think it had some wood framing. I think the side metal, the metal on the side got so hot that it just made the wood ignite, and then it burned. And so that was like our shop. Like, so it's people, when they think garage, this is a detached building that's probably the size of like 6 cars, mostly of which has all my tools. You know, my Kawasaki Mule, like UTV. We left one of our 4Runners in there.
Was your bike in there?
My motorcycle, my safe with all my guns and gold and silver, all that type of stuff. By the time I got to the house that night too, I sprayed water on the safes because they were still standing, but that was the only thing standing. Like freezers, refrigerators, there was nothing standing in the concrete area of where the garage was. The frame of the car, was there. That was just about it. And then just a bunch of, metal, like nails and siding and all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
like nothing salvageable.
Yeah, nothing. Well, I don't know. I mean, I thought maybe stuff in the safe might be, but that's like, I don't care about that. Yeah, that matters, but life is the more important thing to me at that point. So I'd parked a trailer in a spot where I had done some prescribed fire right around the house, and the floor was burning on it. So I went and put it out because I thought if I have animals that live, I need a trailer to be able to move them likely. And so I knew that was going to be an important piece of equipment. So I put the floor out on that, and then it was super smoky in the house. We weren't sure if the roof could have been on fire or what, because it was so smoky. So got a ladder and climbed up on top of the roof and just kind of checked and didn't really see anything. I thought, I think we're okay. I think it's just extremely smoky inside. And then I left and went to go check on cattle and went to check for the yearlings. And then before the fire, one of the things that I grabbed was a gun because I knew it wasn't going to be good when I came back. And I grabbed a case of 490 rounds of ammo for my AR-15. And took that out to go. And praise God I grabbed that right before the fire because I was in the garage. If it had burned, I could have called a friend probably for a gun and ammo, but like I wouldn't have had any on my own. And so I threw that in the car. We had that. I went out and to where my yearlings were, and I couldn't even go into the pasture because there was dead animals in the cattle guard that tried to get out of the cattle guard. None of them were where I had put those yearlings when we left. They'd all busted through the fence. So when you have large herds of I'd have just had 5 animals, they probably wouldn't have just pushed through the barbed wire fence. They wouldn't have had the strength or the ability to break it, really. When you have hundreds and hundreds of animals in a herd, those at the back, if they really want to go a certain direction, they'll just push those in the front, and they can't see in front of them, and they'll just push it right through. So they'd just push through fences, barbed wire fences. So started finding dead animals, but I didn't really know where everything was at. I just thought, well, they probably went downwind because the fire was moving that way. They're trying to get away from the fire, and shot animals for I don't know how many hours. I drive around in really big areas where there was lots of animals with the headlights. I had a headlamp on, and then certain areas where I knew there'd probably still be animals a certain direction. There's too much topography, I'd just have to walk. And so, we're talking, this may be midnight at this point. Trying to evaluate the extent of what kind of shape an animal is in. Most of them were already dead and or couldn't even pick their head up. You could just see some breathing. There was certainly some that I'd missed too at that time that I'm sure were alive, but you couldn't tell. There becomes a point where it's like, okay, I just saw one over there that's walking around that needs to be put down. So you're not going to sit here for 5 minutes and like check the pulse of this other animal that might be dead, might not, So I worked on that herd till 3 a.m. and was approaching the point where that 490 rounds of ammo that I grabbed, I was starting to question if I had enough ammo because I hadn't even made it to the cow herd yet. And I didn't even make it to that cow herd that night. That was the next morning when I made it to the cow herd. The yearlings were certainly worse off. They're faster, I think. And they really tried to outrun that fire, and it just made it worse because they were strung out for like a mile and a half. The slowest at the back and the fastest at the front. And I I didn't, and then one donkey was in there. The horses and the other donkey I didn't see that night. They ended up staying put though, where I'd placed the yearlings initially, and they all ended up surviving and had very little burn marks or anything.
The horses and the donkey?
Yeah, so that just shows if those yearlings would have stayed where I put them, they would have been okay. But they didn't. They tried to outrun it, and it didn't work for them. And so mostly got through that herd that night. Woke up first light the next day. Of course, didn't sleep much at all that night, knowing what I was going to have to be doing the next day. And picked up and moved one of those trailers, and then the county extension agent, I remember, he drove up, and when I saw him, we just started bawling, and we hugged and this, that, and the other for a while, and I told him where he could go if he wanted to go see the yearlings, and so he drove over there, and he told me later on, when he got there, he just broke down on his knees and just started sobbing. Got my stuff together and went up to go to the cow herd. Most of them were already all dead. I bet there wasn't 40, 50 cows we had to shoot. Probably not. Yeah, maybe not even that. There were still a few that we missed, though. I mean, when there's hundreds and hundreds of animals in a small area, you can't even count them, right? Like, you just get mixed up because they're not in a line. And so it's easy to drive across one that might be breathing. And so a friend, Bryson, from church, who we lead a life group with, actually called me that morning, and he rode with me with some of the cows and helped with that, just to be with me, more than anything. And so it was nice to have that, because the feeling of loneliness that I had the night before at 2 a.m. walking these hills, shooting animals that you've cared for and aren't named, but this animal from that animal on a lot of them, like their idiosyncrasies and all these different things, and having to look them in the eyes and then put a bullet in their head I don't know if I've ever felt that lonely before. But I didn't want my wife Aubrie to be there. She was pregnant, 3rd trimester at that point, and one didn't need to be in all that smoke. Stuff was still smeltering, and she just didn't need to be there. And there was other stuff she could be taking care of at the house. And so, and a lot of my friends I knew were doing the same thing that I was doing that night. And I learned too, there were some people probably doing that. A lot of people were not doing what I was doing. Maybe they had other things going on, or they were just going to wait till daylight or whatever else. But I just had this sense of knowing things are suffering and wanting to put them out of their misery as fast as I can. I just tried to put myself in their shoes, and I would not want to be laying cold, alone, in the dark, can't even get up, in excruciating pain, 3rd-degree burns for any extent of time. So, again, animals were first and foremost. So, took care of that and quickly learned that there was far more to do than I could do. And I had to become more of a manager, because there was help starting to come in. And it's easy, especially on stuff like that. People don't know where things are, your stuff is, and all this. So it's easiest a lot of times to feel like I just do it myself. But very much had to become a manager rather than a doer, and just trying to orchestrate mass chaos. And so, and again, like, a lot of this is not real clear. It all runs together, and I can't remember a lot of it, because you're running on very little sleep and lots of adrenaline. And so I remember somebody calling, the extension agent calling and saying, "Hey, we've got some guys that want to help with livestock stuff. Can we come help?" And I had some friends that had called and just said, "Hey, you probably need to ship your animals off." If I'd heard about rendering trucks, so they'll come out and pick up dead animals. A lot of feedlot country, there's rendering trucks, and they'll make dog food and all these different things out of them. Well, for several days, I didn't hear of any rendering trucks coming around, and people are saying, "Well, you need to bury your animals." And my friend Justin Rader had told me shortly after the fire. He said, "You're going to want to bury those." And I said, "Well, I'd rather just leave the animal there, like the carcass can maybe add some life back to this, scorched earth, and there's some value in that." And he just said, mentally, you don't know what that's going to do to you long term, because those bones are going to be there for 50 years. And so what's that going to be like 30 years from now? You're driving across your pasture over the fire, and you're just continuing to have to just drive over all these burned carcass.
Bones everywhere.
Bones everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Bury it if you can. So that's where I'd accepted a gentleman to help. Ben Needham, probably, with Curtec. Some of the guys that own Curtec, the Kirbys, came up and they brought crews up and helped out. And so Landon, I didn't know the guy, pulled up, skid steer and all this other stuff and said, "Hey, how can I help?" And so had them start at least just piling up animals with the intent of probably burying them. And then the vet's wife, Doug Crouch, and Caroline, his wife, I don't know if you know Caroline Schwarzenbach was her maiden name.
I don't think so.
From Lipscomb County. But anyways, Caroline lined up and found rendering trucks eventually and said, "Hey," and so we got those lined up. They showed them where to go. And so again, we had so many people. Like I had those guys coming up. Our good friend Nate Horn, who we went to college with, and he was my little in our fraternity and roommates with, and
he'll probably show up.
He'll show up on this podcast at some point. Yeah, he'll have to. That man had a child the week before the fire, and he calls me again. I think it was on a Wednesday or Thursday, and said, "Hey, I'm going to be there like Friday or something like that." Like his child's not even a week old. First child from Lubbock, Texas. He's going to drive 4 hours and just come help me, like whatever you need help with. And which I already knew Nate was like the man to do that, right? And one of my closest friends, like talk to that man every day. But that was just a cool thing of, I'm gonna serve, however I can. And so
that's Nate.
I know there's lots of other people that were a part of this. I mean, Kinsey Burris,
Who's that?
She was my one of my high school English teachers, and they ranch, her and her husband. They live in the county north of us, and then of course you work with her because she's part owner.
Kinsey,
of the financial planning firm.
Yeah, Kinsey.
That
I know her.
Your father owns, and her, and so she called me and just said, "Hey, I'm coming to help." Because here's a lot of things too. A lot of people would call and just offer help, but like at the end of the day, you just kind of blow it off. And she said, "Hey, I'm coming your way. I have a UTV on a trailer. I'm going to come take pictures of your cows." That was something I'd never thought about. I needed photos of all the dead animals. 1, for insurance purposes. 2, there's some subsidies that help. The Farm Service Agency can help compensate you for dead animals. And they needed like time-stamped photos of every animal. And so she did that. So she still, we'd missed cattle. So I remember she had to come back to the house. I think I wasn't even around, but she came back, grabbed a gun and had to shoot livestock still. Her and her son Bridger, and just for eternally grateful for them. And they've gone through a fire before, so she knew what needed done. And that's why she just called and said, "Hey, I'm on my way." Like if I wouldn't answer my phone, she'd have shown up and found something to do and started doing it. And so there was a lot of people that did that, and that was a very cool thing. I started receiving, I knew our place that we had bought didn't burn, and I knew after I didn't have any animals left, that somebody needed that. Somebody was in need. Somebody had animals that survived that didn't have grass. And so because we'd recently acquired it, I knew that there was some work that needed to be done. So I kind of started going over there and prepping some things. Some people were calling, and mutual friends or whatever else, saying, "Hey, I'm bringing feed up," or this or that. And so I started kind of unloading them over there, just so that I would have something extra, because it's not a huge place, but it was something. It was grass, and we could supplement and buy somebody some time. At that time, I knew my cousins had animals that had survived but didn't have any grass left. And so the intent was to receive their animals as soon as we could over there.
You can probably tell at this point, but you had 2, right?
At this point, I didn't think I had any animals that survived. So this is late of that week of the fire, maybe a Friday or Saturday, probably. And Nate Horn is staying with us. I was so tired of managing people. I just said, "Nate, go help wildlife." when I was out just doing things, I would run across a deer that had no face left that was still alive, that need to be put down. And none of the wildlife have any food or water, maybe natural water, but that's it. And a lot of it is real nasty.
Yeah, tainted.
And so that's what Nate did. Nate ran around and shot animals that were suffering, or put out hay. There was donated hay or feed, or he bought bags of corn, I think, and poured it out, just trying to do, stuff it's urgent. I feel like it's important. I didn't have time for. And it was stuff that Nate cared about. And so that was super cool.
Nate loves your ranch.
Nate loves land and animals.
Yeah, but he loves your ranch.
Yes, he does. He absolutely does.
He's told me multiple times he thinks it's the prettiest place on the planet. It's beautiful.
It is. It's pretty. It's very
beautiful.
Pretty. I mean, we've got Canadian river frontage and those kind of things. But so that was something Nate was doing. I had to be thinking about, okay, like, I need to find somebody that can dig a big pit. When I started ranching, I was very low input. I didn't have many things. I was borrowing my dad's tractor to even like unload trucks for hay and all that type of stuff. And so I didn't have the equipment to do a lot of things that I needed to be doing. But fortunately, I had a bunch of people volunteer that did. And so, again, there's no service like in the county. We're still running our house on the generator. One of the most stressful things for me is I'm not a mass communicator. It stresses me out. And my phone was so blown up with messages. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of new text messages a day, and maybe 20 or 30 missed calls and voicemails because I wouldn't have service. And I didn't have time to check it. So I'd come home maybe 11 or midnight, right? And then I would have Starlink internet because our generator's running, and my phone would blow up. And I don't know for how many weeks. Each night would just try to spend an hour and a half each night just going through text messages and knock it down to about 150 new messages and not look at the most recent 150. And then each morning, check it for an hour and work on that. And I did that for several weeks until finally I got to the point where I could get it below 150 new messages.
What were all the messages?
Probably 80% of the people on my contact lists, I've got, I don't know, probably 2,200, 2,300 phone numbers in my phone. I bet probably not 80%, maybe half those people.
Yeah. Reached out.
Just, hey, do you need any help? And it sounds bad, but there's a lot of people that I think it makes them feel good to feel like they're a part and offer help, but they really have no intention of really helping. And that's okay. Like, they're maybe halfway across the US, or whatever else, but people that I don't talk to on a monthly basis or anything like that, and offering help. And that was just a distraction, and it was really hard. I mean, thankful for it, I guess, but
it's one more thing to do.
Yeah, I didn't need to be messing with any of that. So kind of filtering through some of that. And I'm sure there's still a gobs of people I never even responded to, again, it was very stressful for me. So that's the last thing you want to do when you've been in the trenches all day.
And you're not sleeping.
And so late that week, my cousins have a ranch west of Canadian, super rough country. So there was still a lot of cattle spread out. That's a much larger ranch than ours. I knew there was cattle spread out in canyons suffering, and that pained me to know that. So I went out and shot cows for them for a couple of days. Again, knowing I was going to be receiving animals that were alive that they had later, and then I was offering to care for them because I didn't have anything that survived. Because they had other things that they needed to take care of too. Their ranch foreman's house burned down, and they lost a bunch of stuff too. Sunday morning, the week after the fire, 5 days after the fire, or whatever it was, 4 or 5 days, I needed to go drive over to the ranch that didn't burn that we'd bought, and I was going to take a Humvee over there. We'd bought also, there was an old house on that place that we'd bought, and there was furniture in it. It was a house that we were going to get rid of. Like, we didn't want it. Nobody lived in it for decades, but there's furniture in there. Aubrie wanted to donate that furniture for people that had gotten displaced that needed furniture. So she put a post on Facebook just saying, hey, free furniture, just come get it, right? She was planning on being there later that day. I was going to run over and start prepping water and some fence and some other things that needed to be done. So I go outside. I think I was up till 3 a.m. that night, maybe feeding wildlife or something, putting out hay because I just couldn't sleep. So might as well be doing something. And got up at sunrise and look out, and here's this lone like heifer, like a couple hundred yards from the house. And she looks real skittish and apprehensive. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I had something survive. Like at this point, I had not seen any of my animals that needed to be alive if they were alive. So I hopped in the Humvee and went to go put out some feed because I knew she hadn't eaten for days. When I started driving out there, she started running off from me. Like generally they run to me. She had so much PTSD that like it just scared her, I guess. And when I started kicking the cake out, like she ran off again. So and this is an animal that like before the fire, I could have put a piece of cake, which is, I say cake. It's most of your listeners might not know. It's
not birthday.
It's called a range cube. It's just a compressed piece of like wheat or corn or cottonseed or these kind of things that they eat on as a winter supplement. Like I could put a piece of those in my mouth and hold it out between my teeth, and they would reach up with their tongue and grab it out of my mouth. Like this is how gentle these animals are. And for her to run off when I drive out with the feed truck is just makes you realize what she just went through. And plus she hadn't seen any other animals either. And so, crisis mode, right? Hop in the Humvee, go out there, put that out. And I eventually ended up dragging her into a set of pens where I had water and shut her in there and knew she had food and water, so she was fine. Hop in the Humvee to drive over to the place that we had bought. And Humvees are, these are old military Humvees. They don't drive fast and they're very loud. And so it's nothing but, I got to drive 13 miles, nothing but me and my thoughts as I'm just cruising along on this highway. And all of a sudden, like it hits me like a ton of bricks and I just start bawling. Because here it is on a Sunday morning. In a normal situation, I'd be at church. And I felt like it was God telling me, hey, you've seen all this death. You don't think there's any life in any of this. This is not a fun situation. Hopelessness is abundant. Yet here, after all this death, I've resurrected an animal. Well, there's an animal that is still alive and there is still life. And it's through this one lone animal. And we're talking over 700 animals died. And here one happens to show up on a Sunday morning, like 5 days after all this death. And so I just felt like it was God speaking to me saying, hey, like I sent my one and only son. I killed him and then brought him back to life so that you can be free. So that just like hit me a ton of bricks, as I'm driving along really slow in the Humvee. That didn't hit me initially when I first saw her. I was just in crisis mode, like food and water, that's what she needs. And then when Aubrie showed up later to start meeting people to give away furniture, I just walked up to her and started bawling and shared that with her, and she started crying, I think. And so that was just a cool God moment at the time. I've got stories we could share for hours. I mean, hours and hours, hours. That was just kind of a neat one. I bought insurance on those animals 6 days before the fire. That's not a coincidence. Like that's a God thing. Like what a blessing that was, because we lost a lot of stuff and I needed to replace a lot of stuff very quickly. And I knew we weren't going to have a source of income for quite some time. And so what a blessing that was, kind of looking through here. And like, I'd have a random person call me, say, hey, I'm so-and-so from Kansas. I'm going to be driving through Canadian. I've got an envelope with cash. Where can I leave it? And I'd say, well, I have a landlord that lost a place or whatever else. And they say, okay, well, now I've got 2 envelopes of cash, one for you and one for them.
Oh my gosh.
Where can I leave it? So like stuff like that. I had a feed store in Groom call me and say, hey, you've got $5,000 credit here for whatever you need, fencing or whatever. Someone donated $5,000 for you. No idea to this day who that is, The crazy story. So my brother's father-in-law called and said, hey, I'm going to bring a crew up. We're going to fence for you for a week or whatever it is. Let me back up. So my wife, third trimester, a little over a month after the fire, we were going to a checkup in Amarillo. So our doctor's 2 hours away, for Theo, who was going to be our first son. And we're going just for a routine checkup. We knew that he wasn't growing correctly in utero and that they were going to induce Aubrie early because it could be risky going full term. So we were going for checkups weekly at that point. We had a routine checkup at 10 a.m. in Amarillo on April the 9th. And so we needed to leave at 8 a.m. at the latest. Well, my wife can be a little bit slow and push the envelope for arriving on time to things. And so I'm out in the car waiting for her to come to the car.
That's the gracious way to say it.
I'm out in the car waiting for her, and she walks to the front door naked, like pants on the ground, like the pants are dragging the ground, and she says, and this is at 8 o'clock when we need to be leaving. She says, "I'm bleeding." I was like, okay, get in the car. Like, let's go. I don't know. And she didn't know why she was bleeding, right? She wasn't supposed to be bleeding. Then she proceeds to tell me, you need to grab a towel in case like my water breaks. It's like we're still like a long ways out. Our son was supposed to be born May the 22nd. This is April 9th.
No, we're 33 weeks.
Yeah. Like why do I need to grab a towel? Like you're just bleeding because of something, and I don't understand female anatomy as well as I should. But so anyways, hop in the car, start going to our appointment. Well, she definitely starts going into labor on the way, and it's raining a little bit. Knew we were running late. She called the nurse or the office, and the nurse said, "Oh, what time, what's the time on your contractions?" And she told her, she said, "Oh, if you didn't have an appointment, we wouldn't even have you come this way. But since you have an appointment, just go ahead and keep on coming." Okay, whatever. So as we get to like Pampa.
Does the nurse know her water broke?
Well, her water hadn't broken at this point yet.
Oh, she's going, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get to Pampa halfway, an hour out, and it's progressing. She's like breathing and holding onto the side of the door, right? Now it's actually starting raining pretty good. I'm cruising. I mean, we're moving. And hydroplaning and everything else. And she called again. She wanted to give them an update on timing of contractions and stuff. They didn't even answer the phone, doctor's office. And they told us just go to the clinic. Well, we get to Amarillo whenever we turn off the interstate to go. Fortunately, the exit to the hospital and the exit to the clinic are the same exit off of the interstate. So we turn off. Aubrie says, "Go to the hospital. Don't go to the clinic." And she's breathing, certainly in labor. So I pull up to the hospital instead, even though they told us to go to the clinic. And when she told me that, I really questioned it. I questioned everything to a fault. And I questioned in my mind, do we really, the lady told us to go to the clinic. We need to go to the clinic, not the hospital. This is all internally. I didn't say this. Praise God I didn't say this. The one time I've held my tongue. And so I didn't. Went to the hospital and I said, okay, I'm going to go park the car. And I'd pulled up to the hospital, and Aubrie says, "I can't get out." I said, "What do you mean you can't get out?" She's like, I cannot get out. So I had to get out, and that's when it was like, oh crap, something ain't right. So I open the door, have to help her out. We hobble in. She has one real big push right when we come in, and there's this elderly lady at the front desk. She walks over, "You need a wheelchair?" "Yeah." I said, we'd checked in, fortunately, a few weeks before that, with all our information. And of course, they didn't even want us to do that. They're like, "Oh, it's too early. If it's over a month, then you'll have to just redo it later." Well, praise God, we'd done that because they had all our information. So took her upstairs. I went to go park the car. So I went and parked the car, came upstairs. Fortunately, we'd been there 2 weeks early, so I kind of knew where to go. They took me into a room, and it's happening, right? There's nurses in there, and she's delivering this child. And so apparently, found out later her water broke on the elevator on the way up. The elderly lady, who was just a receptionist, that had Aubrie in the wheelchair, she could tell that something was happening pretty quickly. And Aubrie told her on the way up in the elevator that her water broke. And the elderly lady just reached down and just rubbed Aubrey's shoulder. Didn't say a word, just rubbed her shoulder. And anyway, so they got to the front desk up there, and the receptionist lady up there is like, "Okay, so what's your name and what's your date of birth?" And Aubrey's like, and
in the world?
One of the nurses realizes, "Hey, we don't have time for this." She said, "Okay, she's done here." So that's when they took her into a room, and within 10 minutes, the baby was out, right? I almost missed it parking the car. There was no doctor present whatsoever.
The nurses just delivered the
Yeah,
baby?
the nurses just delivered. And it was like, they were all looking at each other like, who's going to catch this thing? Like, because they were kind of,
There's no
we weren't even in
yeah.
a delivery room. This was just like a training room for like kids. Like, so they didn't even have all the equipment they were supposed to have or anything. But this is the first time that they'd ever delivered in that room before.
What in the world? Why would they, if a pregnant lady shows up and she says, I'm having the baby, how do you
I think they get a lot of
like false alarms?
I think
They must, or
Yeah.
else that just
But
wouldn't
man,
happen.
in the to me, it seems like they're asking for a lot of liability.
Yeah, truly.
So, anyways, we have him. They have to do a full resuscitation. He has to go to the NICU. So now here we are. Fire had happened a month earlier, and now we're living in Amarillo, 2 hours away because our baby's in the NICU, and that was really hard. So. He was on oxygen and couldn't keep his temperature up, and of course wasn't eating and just being tubed all his food, and you can't even hold your own baby, and you especially as a father, it's hard to get attached. One, when you can't even hold your own baby and you don't deliver it. It's really hard to get attached when you've gone through so much death over the last month. You feel like everything you had was stripped away from you, and so as a safety net, your mind says don't get attached to this because it's going to get stripped away too.
Oh, wow.
I fought through that for a while. I didn't really feel much attachment to him. I mean, I certainly cared about him, right? I certainly would have cried if he would have fallen over and died, right? But your body just creates these natural defenses mentally. I did the first week. I don't think I went back home. We were staying in the Ronald McDonald House, which was a huge blessing to not have to worry about meals and a place to sleep. It was just right down the road from the hospital. And then I started bouncing back to the ranch. So I'm just trying to kind of somewhat put Humpty Dumpty back together again and manage some of that stuff. Aubrie never went home until our baby went home. Our dogs are still at home, so somebody's got to feed them every day, and just stuff like that. And so where I was trying to go initially, and there's probably more baby stuff I can share too, but my brother's father-in-law called and said, hey, I'm going to bring a crew up to come help with fence stuff. What do you have? This is what we're going to bring, blah, blah, blah. And I knew that as much fence as I needed to do, I was going to have to spend some money on some stuff that I didn't have to be able to just put things back together. So I was going to buy a skid steer, which is a big, heavy piece of machinery. And I needed a auger attachment because he was going to bring a wire roller to roll up old wire. And so he said, hey, I'm going to get this brand of wire roller. So I thought, and I didn't know anything about any of this. So, I just looked up that brand and saw the closest dealer. They're in Western Oklahoma in Clinton. It's like an hour and a half from Canadian. So I call them and I say, hey, do you have this piece of equipment? They said, yeah. I said, okay, I knew I was going to be going back to Canadian. So I was still kind of like working while I was in Amarillo trying to set things up to where I could be as efficient as possible when I did go back. And they said, yeah, we have it. So I said, okay, I'm going to come and pick it up in a few days. So I drive over there and walk into this business. It's a very large equipment type dealer. This young man's at the front desk, and I said, hey, I'm Adam. I'd called. You'll have a work order already set up for this. And he said, okay. So he's getting the paperwork together. And in this back office, there's this elderly gentleman that we kind of keep making these awkward eye contacts. And then we kind of look away at each other. And he's clearly like a manager, an owner. Like he's probably 80 something, right? And eventually, as the guy's almost got the work order ready for me to go ahead and pay, he says, hey, the elderly gentleman says, hey, what are you doing? And, from the back office. And so I start walking that way, kind of, and he was inviting me kind of towards his office. So I start walking back that way and kind of hang my head in the office and tell him, oh, I'm getting a wire roller. We were part of the fires over by Canadian. And then like right when I enter into his office, like it hits me like a ton of bricks. I was like, I know this guy. Like I've seen this face before. Where have I seen this guy before? And then it's like, I know where. And so I asked him after I said what I was getting. I said, sir, I think I've met you before on an airline flight from St. Louis, Missouri to Oklahoma City like last year. And he kind of starts, he's like, you could tell he didn't really remember it or whatever. And so I said, do you own the Social Security office buildings in Amarillo and Pampa? And he, like, light bulb comes on. He said, I do. And I said, I met you on an airplane flight. And he's the owner of this business. And so we kind of start talking about some of the things we talked about on the airplane. And then we're talking about the fire. And then he invitingly, the young gentleman that was at the front desk calls him in. And he says, hey, this is Adam. He was in the fire. Give him that piece of equipment. It's paid for. And the guy, you could even tell the young guy was kind of surprised. And I was just like, whoa. And at the time, through insurance from our cattle and stuff, like we could have paid for it. It was, I don't know, $3,000 or $3,500 or whatever. But here's this guy I don't even know, and he just gives me this, right? And so tears start falling. I start bawling.
Man.
Because I hadn't even told him that we've got a baby in the NICU and all this other stuff. And it makes him real uncomfortable. He's like, do you need some water or something? I said, yeah, take some water. So he goes back into the kitchen, gets me a bottle of water and brings it back. And you could tell, I think a lot of that generation, right? He's very nice, right? But sometimes, especially young men, like that's not what you do.
Yeah, you don't cry.
You don't cry.
Yeah.
So it made him real uncomfortable.
Men don't cry. And you're right at home. You've been crying.
For the first 3 weeks, I really tried to embrace emotion and work through it. I think there's still some people that haven't. They brush it under the rug, and it's done them a lot of harm. And so I got a lot of my crying out pretty quickly, and I think that was very good because it allowed me to step into serving others and taking care of others' needs better because I had addressed my own. And so that was just another big God thing of, I went to the front desk, the young man just gave me a receipt, and, on the amount due or whatever, it just said, paid for, no charge is what it said. And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, man, that's what God did, right? Like he sent his one and only son. Here we have all this debt. And he said, it's paid for. There's no charge. And so just, again, I could share stories for hours, but things like this, of God reminding me, hey, I'm here.
Man, I like what you said about feeling the emotions when they come. Because you and I particularly, growing up, I think in small rural Texas, America, I think it was common to toughen up, like don't show your emotions. But then even, I don't know, I think even nowadays people, whether you're, from a small conservative town or not, it's common for, no one wants to show the sad sides of themselves publicly or even to themselves. Everyone wants to pretend like, well, I'm seeing the bright, the silver lining, and I want to be positive about this. But grief that's a human emotion. And it's not something that you can't experience the fullness of joy in life with if you don't actually feel the grief, actually feel the sadness. My buddy, you met Dan at my bachelor party, Dan Morse. Dan's awesome. Dan's getting married next weekend, which is incredible. But Dan gave me a book one time called Prayer in the Night. I think it's by a lady named Tish Harrison. I hope I didn't say her name wrong. But the whole book is about that idea that our culture does not know how to grieve. And I think especially young men. And she even mentioned in that book, I think she was either talking about a friend or herself. I think it was her husband, who she said just for years was so angry. And then finally he got counseling. And after years of being angry, she said he spent years of crying because the anger was just a cover up for this underlying sadness that he had never let himself feel. Yeah. And so, I think I commend you, man, for feeling it.
Crazy to say, crazy to think about. I wouldn't wish what we went through on my worst enemy. But I've told several people this, like, it was worth it. All of this was worth it because I grew so much and God refined me and my character so much through the fire that if I can apply that through the rest of my life, like God can do so many things through it, and it's going to be worth it for the kingdom. Like, despite the suffering, it's worth it.
What's the biggest change you've seen in yourself from the fire?
having both empathy and sympathy. You know, I'd had friends that had gone through fire before. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what they'd been through. And I'd never really, by the time we moved back to Canadian, there wasn't any devastating fire when we were there. And so I wasn't on the front lines to help anybody. But also knowing that there was a bad fire in 2017, I wasn't living in Canadian, and I'd just recently been married and all these things. But I didn't go offer help. I didn't do any of that. And I didn't understand what they were going through, the mental battle and the anguish. And so being able to relate now, and not just in fire, but in tragedy, it's instilled in me a desire to help in natural disaster situations. So like some of the pieces of equipment, like the skid steer that I bought since the fire, now I have a desire, like if there's a tornado in the, town over, or in the panhandle, or another fire, whatever else, like, man, I want to use the stuff that I've got now and knowing what needs done, and I want to show up and just fill in the gap, because so many people did that for me. And now I understand it. I feel it. Like, I was so selfish pre-fire. Like, yeah. I mean, just in that alone, I mean, there's a lot of different character traits that I feel like I've grown in, but that one alone was totally worth it.
It's a testament.
Yeah. Well, it just, knowing that, I mean, these people are shelling out thousands of dollars, people that don't even know, for someone they don't even know. Like, I had so many cool conversations with a trucker that he was just hauling hay from South Dakota. He was a rancher hauling hay from South Dakota. We got to talk about mental health and suicide and all these different things. He was spending more money in diesel to get that stuff from South Dakota to Texas than the hay was even worth. But he knew somebody needed help and he was going to bring it. And so right after I, unload him, said, "Oh, what are you up to now?" He said, "I'm headed back up to get another load." So here he is. I'm going to drive another 25, 30 hours for somebody he doesn't know.
This is the stuff you don't hear on the news.
No.
About just common people doing crazy acts of service and selfless acts. Yeah, like you said, not just for their family, not just for their best friend, but for people they don't even know.
But he'd been through a fire before.
Man,
he understood.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, you just don't get it till you've done it and been in it. And so it's instilled a deep desire to help in crisis.
What advice would you give to anyone young or old, going through something right now that they feel like there's no end in sight, or they're not going to be able to come back from? Like that hope, you mentioned the hopelessness when you saw the flames, like someone who feels that, whether, because not most, like the average person is probably not going to go through fire in their life, but everyone goes through horrible things.
Know that help is available and coming, but you have to accept it. And that's the hard part. I learned that you're robbing a gift from somebody that they're trying to give to you if they offer help and you decline it. And you're robbing that joy from them. And that can do more harm for them than you even realize. Because a lot of the people that came and served and helped, at the end of the day, they did so much for me, but they say, "No, you did more for me than..." It's like, no, I didn't. But it's like if you've ever gone onto a short-term mission trip or whatever else and you went to go serve somebody, but at the end of the day, you say, "Well, heck, that did more in me than it did for them." Same situation. And when you decline and you say no when somebody offers help, you're robbing them of a gift and joy, But it's so much easier said than done, because especially as in agriculture, like, we're self-sufficient and we do things on our own and, by grit and, control. I want to control it and do, but I reached the point where I was like, this is way out of my control. I couldn't, and we're still cleaning up. Like, I still have so much to do. Here we are almost a year and a half out. I had all that help and we're still going to be cleaning up for the next probably 5 years. We don't have any livestock right now, so it's just, changes a lot, and it's going to change a lot for the future. There's still mental battles that we're going to struggle with. I don't know what this is going to look like fully, but every decision I make now in things that I consider buying or doing, it's what if a fire comes? Like, it's probably going to be inhibiting because things that might have been a really good opportunity and might be a really good opportunity, I might say, no, I'm not going to do that because if a fire occurs, this might happen. So it'd be better not to make that decision. Well, if I make that decision for 10 years and a fire never happens, there was no point in not doing it. I should have went ahead and done it. But in the year that there is a fire, and I did decide to not do that because of the fire, it might make it worth it. But not knowing this uncertainty of the future makes it tough. And so, I mean, literally every decision we make, where we decide to put fence, what type of animals we try to run, when we try to do it, how many we have, where we're going to put them, all those things. Now, in the back of my mind, I say, well, but what if there's a fire, And I feel like that may be self-inhibiting. And so trying to navigate that is going to be difficult. And do I proceed or do I not? I may take more conservative approaches rather than being a little bit more on the edge just because of the what ifs. Yeah, it's a psychological thing more than anything now, and will be for the rest of my life.
It's like trying to put yourself back out there after being hurt. It sounds like I have buddies who've been through divorce, and hearing them work through the psychological piece of like meeting an awesome woman who they could get remarried to, but they're having to go over those same hurdles of like, do I give as much of myself as I did in the past, or like, what if it's taken away from me again? I know those are totally different things, but I don't know. To me, it almost sounds like the definition of faith, to choose to try again, to choose to put your best self forward, even if God might take it again.
Yeah, certainly.
But that, like you said, easier said than done.
Yeah,
so hard.
It is. And when life is involved too, it makes it more difficult. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what it's going to look like exactly. I would say the last 8 months have been somewhat of a sabbatical for us. We're still doing fire cleanup, but we've been trying to focus more on us and our baby and family. And the fire was an extremely good reminder of how short life can be and the value of the things that matter, especially when I don't have any animals right now. Like, that fence can wait. There's no sense of urgency. It's important, not that important, not near as important as family. So, I would say we've been on a sabbatical, and that's been difficult too. Just our child has been hard and growing, but also I wouldn't have been able to spend near as much time with helping if we had animals survive, or if the fire even hadn't happened. We wouldn't have gone and done, like we bought a travel trailer after the fire, and we went up to South Dakota last fall and went hunting and took our baby and camped out on the prairie and went to the Black Hills. And we might have done something like that, but not, we just got back from Montana yesterday. We've been there for 11 days. Like, we're getting to travel more and just get to be a family more because of the fire. So, yeah. There's a lot to it, and we're still navigating. So the power company that started the fire, we ended up filing a claim because they're paying people. They're not admitting fault, but they're paying people for damage. So
interesting.
In my mind, yeah, how does that work?
Yeah.
But so we ended
out
up,
of the goodness of their hearts.
Yes, out of the goodness of their heart. And there's plenty of people that filed lawsuits, and I don't really, that's not a path we were interested in. And so my wife and I have settled on that behalf as landowners, because we have to put a landowner hat on because we were part landowners too. We've not settled in that regard or even filed a claim, but there's still some. Every week we're still coming across stuff that we lost that we didn't even realize. Like, until you need it, it's like, oh wait, I don't have that anymore. It burnt. I don't know how many times I walked around at the garage to go grab something, and I walk around the side of the house and there's no garage there. There's nothing there. I did that so many times. We've rebuilt the garage now, so now it's typically there, but there's still some things that you run across like, oh yeah, that's gone. We don't have that anymore. And so it was a good opportunity to put on a minimalist hat and say, okay, do I really need that? If it's been 8 months since the fire and I haven't needed it, and now I feel like I need it, do I really need it? So there's certainly some things that we've just, I'm not going to replace that. I lost nearly all my guns and I've bought a few, but don't really need it. I'll be all right.
That's not very Texan of you.
No, it's just so easy to accumulate.
It really is.
And over time, and then when it's all disappears, you start to question, do I want to accumulate again? So, yeah, that's where we're at there. We're blessed that it was a multi-billion-dollar company that started the fire. I mean, this could have been a drunk driver, and there's no claim process at all. And because there's so many people that lost their homes. I mean, I can't even imagine losing my home and all this other stuff too. I just cannot imagine it. I'm certain that nobody lost percentage-wise as many animals as we did. I don't think anybody lost as many animals as we did either.
Just pure number.
For sure. I mean, it was over 99.7%. We had 2 that lived. I'd mentioned that one.
Out of 712?
712, yeah. So 710 died. Yeah. So the intensity of the fire was probably greater than where we were at than just about anywhere else. From what I hear, I mean, some people have wildlife back, and I did see a baby fawn yesterday after we got back from Montana, and it warmed my heart because we had no fawns last year. There was no cover. So any does that did survive aborted for the most part, and those that didn't abort because of the stress of the fire, if they had a fawn, coyotes or whatever caught it because there was no place to hide their babies. And so it warmed my heart to get to see a fawn yesterday. But it's going to take, it takes them a long time to come back. Like, it's going to be 5 years with no crazy droughts for the population to even come back to where it was in regards to deer.
Are the trees gone?
Yeah, most all the trees. I mean, there's some new ones that are coming up, but when there's trees that are multiple hundreds years old that are gone, that you've done family photos in and those kind of things, that you can't put a number on that or replace that. That's kind of my son will not see the ranch that I saw 2 years ago ever in his life. The trees won't recover that fast in his time, in his life. So that's kind of a wild thing to think about. But we've had a good year of rain. Last year was terrible. We didn't grow anything, and things are recovering. It's just going to take time.
Gosh, well, I'm proud of you as a friend, and I've always looked up to you, and wanted to be more like you in a lot of ways, and thought much of you. But it's really crazy how God works, because I think even when I was thinking about starting this podcast, I did not know we were going to be talking about this. Like I had a vision with yours to talk about, obviously all the cool ranching things. We talked about some of them today, but also about like how your mind works and how you learn things, and about some of our stories, and about, I wanted to talk more about marriage and all these things. And I mean, I didn't know that you would have gone through something so horrific, but man, however much I thought I looked up to you before, I look up to you even more now after this, and it's not just in how successful you've been. Because I think before I was always like, man, Adam just does things so efficiently. He's so smart. He figures out new ways to do things. And I always wanted to implement that in my own life. I'm not in ranching, but in whether it's in, wealth management or the sports I love or whatever, I wanted to be more like you. But now I think on an even deeper level, I'm like, I want to be more like Adam from a faith standpoint, like seeing the way you view just looking at the blessings that have come from the loss, which is that's so backwards. The world would see it and say, this is just horrible, and you saying you're thankful in some ways it happened because it made you less selfish. I mean, that's such a cool take.
Absolutely. Well, and we've got to allow God to use this stuff for his glory. And so this goes back to the legacy thing. Like, I think that's leaving a legacy, is sharing this hardship, put the things and how God grew me as a man through that. I have a friend that's in his 50s and single, never been married. He's a rancher, not a believer. And we'd had conversations about that. And he called me the day after the fire. And he said, "Hey, I've never been through what you're going through. I don't understand. I've never prayed before. I don't even know how to pray. But I want you to know that I'm praying for you, and I prayed for you." And if that's not a cool thing of God working amidst all that, I don't know what is. And so it's been a good driver of the fire for wanting to implement more of a legacy and share my story and share our story and allow God to use us for his glory, despite being in agriculture, when you can have 5 8-hour days in a week and not see another person, And so some people start to question, how is this impacting the kingdom? Very rarely do I have that lack of communication with civilization, but I know that some people feel that way, and even in their regular jobs. And it's like, be excellent, steward the resources that God has gifted you, and you can serve him through it, whatever that looks like, even though it may be through the mundane, so.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great, man. We're at a little over 2 hours.
Okay. Again, I could share stories for hours. Those are kind of some of the bigger ones that I would want to encapsulate in a format that 3 generations down the line can hear.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Oh yeah. So. And the cool thing is it doesn't have to be the end,
No, absolutely not.
Well, we're probably in each other's lives for better or for worse moving forward anyways, but I want to talk to you more about some of the other things that,
absolutely,
are apart from the fire, just about life.
Yeah. We can certainly do another podcast at some point too.
We'll have to do it again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, thank you for this platform and sharing and letting people be intentional. And I would say, if you have intentionality on the forefront, you can do some cool things through this. So
thanks, man. It's fun. It's really cool. Well, you know as well as anyone, our world's so crazy with phones. Like, so we're all, myself included, we're all really distracted, and it's kind of hard to get people's attention and stay focused. So it's funny how if you throw up some lights and a mic and put on headphones, it it forces my crazy brain to look at someone and have a true conversation. And so I'm almost like, even if no one ever heard this, it's worth its weight in gold to just have 2 hours where I get to talk to Adam.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
That's special.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is. Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.